Welcome to Talkin Divorce with Donald Schweitzer and Lori McShane.
Today we're talking divorce. And again, I've got Lori with us, and we've got Joe Greenfield, a guest that's been on our show before. Lori?
Yes, and today, Don, I am super excited to dive deeper on the forensic cell phone.
Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback from the show that you were on, Joe.
Oh, wonderful.
And I think, we all knew that we had to get you back. And thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me again.
And, we did this before when we were in the studio with you. But I do want to remind our viewers who they're actually listening to, because I think that it's pretty impressive, and we're very fortunate to have you here. You also are involved with SC, right?
I am. I'm an associate professor of practice at the University of Southern California, USC. I'm now almost done with my 20th year teaching there.
You don't look like you're old enough to be 20 years there. Holy cow, man!
Yeah, it's been quite a journey there. So when I started, USC had a couple of courses in what was called the Information Technology program. There was a course in web security, network security, and digital forensics. I took over the program, built 2 undergraduate minors, one in cybersecurity, one in digital forensics, and I've also since co-authored a undergraduate degree in intelligence and cyber operations. And so now we have a couple hundred students in the program.
I don't know where you get the time to do all that, but we're grateful. I'm grateful that I've met you. I think that, we've mentioned before that you've worked with me on a very important case that I had, and it was just an incredible experience having you, as our expert. You've worked on some pretty big cases.
I have worked on some pretty big cases.
Okay, maybe we could find some time, Lori, to kind of dig into it a little bit, but I just want to mention some names. We won't talk about the cases yet, if at all, but Hunter Biden comes to mind. Right.
Yes, I was actually the first forensic expert examiner to analyze and validate the Hunter Biden laptop. It was part of a news article, and they retained me, and I was the first to say that it was not manufactured by a foreign intelligence agency.
Okay. A man by the name of Tom Brady.
We were outed by the Drudge Report. We were one of the first. We were the retained expert for the Deflategate case.
Okay, and then I know another one is Ariana Maddox.
So we were. It's funny enough that my entire declaration ended up on Reddit for that case, and it was, analyzed by the Redditverse, and so we were there as the expert for that case.
That's really interesting. Wow, we'll have to look for it. And then, of course, you worked on my case, and stuff, and we won't get into that again. But you don't just do obviously. Superior court, family court matters. I mean, your expertise is needed everywhere, in a lot of different ways. They're not only court proceedings, but like we talked about with Tom Brady, that wasn't really a court proceeding, but you got involved with, I guess it's the NFL or something, or what was that?
Yeah, so it was involved with the analysis of his cell phone as part of the NFL proceedings. So we did the analysis of the phones to determine if there was any indication of the knowledge of the footballs and the deflating, and so that if I remember, parts of our report ended up on the Drudge Report, but we were identified. My partner Brad Merriman was identified as the expert on that.
Okay, so Lori's got some good opening questions to ask you, just so kind of dig a little bit further that we didn't really get into the last time we spoke to you. So it's all yours, Lori.
Yeah, last time we just barely touched the surface of the digital footprint. And so I guess I would like to start with is what people, they don't realize that their phone reveals.
It's, we have become so reliant upon our cell phones for every day. I talk to my students and I ask them, could you go a day without your phone? What about a week? What about a month?
How about an hour?
About an hour, exactly. And a lot of people look at me with, like I grew a third head when I ask them about, giving up their phone for even a day.
Joe, I just want to say I went to see a speaker series the other night, or if I go to like the iPic theaters locally here, and I force myself to turn that phone off because I know it's good for me, but it's like giving your child away or something. So,
I know.
But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're not checking our phones right now, which I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I think,
Hey,
it's
somebody help me here.
exactly.
But mine's really close by
There
if I
you
need
go.
it.
Exactly. And they've become such an extension of ourselves that I challenge my students and I challenge people to say, what is it about you that I will not learn when I analyze your phone? Because I'll know who your friends are. I'll know who you message. I'll know if you're, talking smack about somebody else because I'll have all your messages. I'll have your third-party messages. I'll have, all the photos, the videos. But even more than that, I'll have your geolocation. Because one thing that a lot of people don't know is that your cell phone for location services is pinging GPS satellites sometimes 60 times a second. And so we'll have precise locations of that phone. And if you're like me and I panic when I don't have my phone on me and I leave the house and I'm in the car, I'll pretty much know where you are at all times. Now, granted, that only goes back a certain number of weeks, unless like on the case we had, Don, where there was some finagling of the phone.
Right. So you really get into the deepest privacy portions of a human being. I mean, if you get a hold of somebody's phone, you could figure out all the great things that are happening with that person and possibly all of the things that person wouldn't want anybody else to know. So it's very, very private.
It is very private, and that's why there's a lot of safeguards that we put in. And it's not even just cell phone locations. If you store your passwords on your phone, I'll have access to all that as well. So, when we do a typical iPhone extraction, it'll pull out the Apple keychain, and I'll have every account, username, and password that you have saved on your phone. So there's obviously a lot of safeguards we put into place. Our firm does not do any work without an attorney engagement, especially for family law cases. We don't want to get into a situation where we're doing anything that's outside of a legal court order or legal justification.
Okay.
What about apps on the phone? Same scenario with apps?
Same scenario. So if you're using WhatsApp or Signal or...
I'm thinking of ChatGPT. You know how many people just talking to ChatGPT these days, and Claude and
Some
all
people
of
use
those?
them as their counselors.
Yeah.
I have people coming in, well, I consulted with ChatGPT and they told me that the law says X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I didn't know that person had a license, man. Mr. ChatGPT. Yeah, I do have a case. I was trying to hold this back here, but since you brought this up, Lori, I just finished a case involving a AI generated image that was meant to scare the dickens out of my client.
Sure.
Because what the perpetrator did, the husband, he took a picture of her keepsake pillow that she had since she was a little girl. That was kind of like a security blanket.
Yeah.
And then altered the image to look like it was stabbed a bunch of times and then posted it. And, of course, she saw it and it freaked her out. They just separated and stuff like that. So, there's this AI bent now to technology. And I really would love for you to talk a little bit about that because in this case, he did something extra to make it scary. He didn't just take a picture of her pillow while she was gone. He went and altered it and things like that.
Oh, goodness.
And could there be cases where people could say it wasn't me, it was the AI that did it? I have a computer, and now we've got Claude, and you've got all these different programs. That's just one of them. I know that ChatGPT with Coworker, and my firm is looking at all this stuff. It gets to the point where you could create a human being to do tasks for you. And what happens if that human being, that you created or that assistant, could you blame it? Can you blame the person?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I've talked a lot with my students. I've talked with my wife about this. I've talked with a lot of people because AI it's one of these technologies that's really entered kind of the everyday part of our world, just like email and text messages and things like that. And so it's a question of what can you rely upon, what can you establish as truth, and how can you act on that information? In my somewhat expert opinion, I'm not an AI expert, but I've certainly have learned a lot, especially in my studies. We're getting to a point where AI is relied upon by a lot of people who don't have a foundational knowledge in the area. So what you talked about with, AI, I consulted with AI and they said this is the law. And I'm like, well, it's one thing for an attorney to use AI as a resource in exploring different areas of the law versus an individual who has no background or basis, so that because you don't know what's real or not. We have most, if not all, AI models have a big problem with hallucination, where it wants to tell you what you want to hear as opposed to what the truth is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will make stuff up in order to fill that gap. And, there have been court precedent about lawyers being sanctioned for, using it to write briefs, and it hallucinates case reports. There have been experts that have been excluded for using AI to aid in forming their expert opinion. And now we have deep fakes and AI generated images. And especially when it comes to court, and we've talked about this, I would challenge anyone listening to this that if you're presented with something in court that doesn't have an expert production or an attorney production or some type of provenance, we have no way to know if it was generated by an AI or not.
Wow.
We're seeing, not with your cases, but with others, we're seeing messages generated by AI.
It'd be easy to do, I would presume.
Easy.
But if the person was operating on their device and
Yep.
that device was in your sweet hands,
Yep.
wouldn't you be able to figure out that they were giving commands and things like that?
Absolutely. And even before the days of AI, we were doing this type of work. We had a case that it was not a family law case. It was an individual that was suing their employer because they claimed that the employer and the management of the employer had sent racist text messages to them. They produced it from their phone. We did the imaging of the phone. We did the forensic preservation of the phone. We analyzed it, and we had a very awkward conversation with the law firm because we said not only did he not receive these messages, these are the apps he used to generate
Wow.
these messages, and these are the dates and times that he did this.
Oh, wow.
So, very awkward conversation with the law firm.
You got to be a very busy guy. I mean, you're in high demand, I would think, because you're in Los Angeles County, one of the most populated parts of the country, and probably the biggest court system in the world. And you've got Hollywood, and you've got a lot of drama out here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can just imagine that, it's just growing exponentially because of AI and all this stuff.
It's really, we have a situation now where you don't know, you're seeing something on paper, you're seeing something on the computer, and you have a question about the truth of it. And now with AI, we have to question everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lori, I was thinking, as Joe was talking about, how you almost have to have his number on speed dial, because I think that we're going to see more and more in our litigation, people making up text messages and stuff. I mean, there are lots of people out there that just want to win, and they'll stop at nothing to win in family court, and how's a judge supposed to know? So I think that as an attorney, what I'm going to do after hearing you say all of this, hey, if you have any doubt, if you didn't send that message, you need to let me know right away so I could get Joe on the case right away so that we could present that in court.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's going to be a little tricky because it's almost like getting a search warrant for the person's phone. You got to
Right.
get the court to say, yeah, turn it over.
Well,
You know?
we can do the inverse, which is,
Oh.
if your client, if your client is alleged to have sent a certain message, we analyze his phone and we say, hey, there's no evidence on this phone that these messages were sent. So we need to look at her phone to confirm that she did receive them, if it's a he versus
Yeah,
she,
yeah.
or whoever the other party is.
Sure.
So anytime it's an allegation of this person sent these messages, we can say we looked at the device, we looked at the backups, we looked at the computer in case there's synchronization going on there. There's no evidence that these messages were ever sent from this device. So pony up a forensic expert to validate this, or let
Yeah.
us do it.
Yeah.
What about deleting? Like, can they send and then delete and wipe it off their phone? Oh, I never sent
Yep.
it, type of thing.
So that is going to require a deeper analysis, but it's something we can determine if there's deletion, not necessarily what was deleted. And this is going to get into the weeds a little bit. I want to make sure it's okay.
No,
for
that's
your-
okay, but I'm surprised already by your answer. So please keep going. That scares me a little bit. People can get away with deleting and you not knowing what it is. So.
Well, it's what happens. I'm going to assume it's an iPhone. I'm going to assume it's iMessage because that's the most common thing we see. What happens is there's a database that stores text messages. And in order to make sure that those text messages are with the right person for the conversation. There's a unique ID associated with that conversation. Now, the database lines up almost like an Excel spreadsheet where we have sequential entries for each message sent. So if we're looking at this sequence and we see in the database a missing row in that sequence, that means that there's a deletion that occurred there. So we'll see sequence number 1000, 1001, 1005, and we'll know that there was something deleted in the middle there. We don't necessarily know what it is, but we can guesstimate the time based on the previous message and the last one.
Well, that's actually pretty significant. And the reason why, Lori, is I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so my client says that he sent me a message that I'm going to, hurt you, tomorrow morning. And she says that she received that about 2 p.m., 2 days ago or whatever it is. You have the copy of the phone and you could see that there just happened to be a deletion at about that time. So, okay.
Within that window,
so
at
it's
least.
some corroborating evidence. Why would he do it? And, so that's pretty good evidence.
Absolutely. And what a lot of people don't remember and don't realize about their phones is very few people today use a phone where that is the very first cell phone that they've ever owned in their lives. And so what ends up happening is, especially for iPhones, you'll use iCloud to back up the phone, or you'll use your computer, or there'll be message synchronization between your iPhone and your iPad and your laptop. So there may be a copy of those messages on any of those devices. I have a case right now. It's a DV case, but it's not a divorce. It's not it's involving minors actually, where the parent deleted certain messages off of the child's phone, and they needed to recover them as part of the domestic violence hearing, and luckily we were able to get the messages off the laptop because there was message sync turned on. So things are not always deleted. They're not always deleted from every data repository. So oftentimes we'll go very wide and collect everything in order to find these messages. Doesn't always work, but
right. Well,
sometimes it does.
You just reminded me of what we've been seeing in some of these investigations that are national news. The recent one was the shooting at the correspondence dinner.
Yeah.
When they found out that the gentleman who tried to kill the president or whatever he's trying to do, they went to his house in Torrance, and darn well the first thing that they were looking for was that computer and any other devices that were around there. And it seems like the FBI is going to go there first now, and stuff. And so it's at that high level, but it's also at the level that we're all at right now.
Absolutely. Well, everyone should be entitled to the truth, and that's what we do with forensics. We are the fact finders. We're the truth finders. And as you well know, Don, my role as the expert is to tell the truth,
right?
Whether it's good or bad or ugly.
Yeah.
That's my job.
It was a pleasure working with him, Lori, because Joe and I were on the same wavelength. I told him that I don't hire experts ever to falsify or make up stuff or lean in a direction. I want the truth because my reputation is very important with the judge. And Joe, as the expert, is just the same thing because he might be appearing in front of that same judge, or judges talk, or people get out there. And, one thing that some law firms do is they take the transcripts from prior hearings and then they use it against the experts when they're not telling the truth and everything. So it's comforting to know that Joe's above the board, and when he says it's there or it's not there, then you could have confidence that that's the truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie.
The
And
numbers
all the
don't
data
lie.
code doesn't lie.
Yeah.
It's luckily all digital information. It's ones and zeros. There's not a lot of gray area.
Do you ever get like super emotional cases where you don't know whether or not if this person is actually needs to go down the forensic evidence and he is just based on emotion driven outcome?
That's a great question.
That's a great question because that does happen in divorces.
And we have a lot of people who will call us up and they'll say, well, I need to know if this is happening on my device. And the first thing I'll tell them is look, we're a digital forensics firm, and we serve as experts in court. So if you're not planning on using the work we do as part of any court proceeding or in defense of litigation, you're not really looking for forensics. You're not really looking for experts like us, because everything we do is in preparation for trial. So the first thing we do, and something I tell all my students and all of our new employees, is assume this case will be litigated. And when you assume the case is litigated, you assume that there's going to be an expert on the other side of equal or greater skill, expertise, and knowledge. And if I do my job right, as we did in your case, there was no rebuttal.
Right. Right. He just packed up and
He just packed up and left.
He didn't show up the last day.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what I tell people is, if you're looking for curiosity, that's not what we're here for. It's if you believe that there's something going on your devices, or there's evidence there that's needed for a litigation or in defense of a litigation. That's what we're here
Okay,
for.
so there are some people, Joe,
Yeah.
they'll pay you huge amounts of dollars because they know that there's bugs all over their house. And
Always.
I mean, I had a lady come into my office. This was about almost 20 years ago. She was one of my clients. She walked into my office right through past the receptionist, and she was wearing a football helmet. I said, what's going on? Why are you wearing the football helmet? And she says, well, because, I want to avoid them hearing what I'm going to say and stuff. And she was convinced that there were people bugging her garage and all that other stuff. And obviously there was somebody that was mentally unstable, and stuff. And they're willing to, she was willing to pay a lawyer to, entertain her thoughts and stuff, and it was sad. It was very, very sad. But I could think that because once the public knows about you and your company and stuff like that, there's going to be a lot of people that have paranoia and they want, they want that. So, it's kind of like me where I tell people, look, you don't want to chase the Holy Grail. You think that this person's hiding $100,000, but do you want to spend $100,000 and find out that he's only got $5,000? Let's look at this realistically, and you use good judgment. We have to talk to people about that stuff too, and I imagine you probably have lots of stories about that.
Oh, yes, we do. And one of the things that does help us today is we tell everyone who calls us that you have to hire an attorney first. We have to be engaged through a law firm, and there's actually a very specific reason for that, and it's the Supreme Court decision in the Capital One case. The Capital One precedent is that anything that is done by an expert prior to the engagement of counsel is not protected under privilege. So if we don't start working for an attorney from the onset of the investigation, every email that we send, every document we work on, anything we write down is not protected under attorney-client privilege, attorney work product.
Work product privilege, yeah.
That's the work product privilege, exactly. So if that person convinces a reputable attorney first, who then convinces me.
You're either going to say no or you're going to fire that attorney as your friend, right?
Exactly. But what we oftentimes do for these individuals is we go back to what would you do with this information? What is your investigative goal? Are you planning on investigating who is, doing these things to you? Are you planning on litigating against them? We regularly have people call up saying that I'm going to go after, the biggest companies in the world because they've implanted a chip in my head.
Right.
And I say, you need to hire an attorney first.
Or a doctor.
Or a doctor. Yeah, we're the wrong person.
Right.
But then what we do, and we oftentimes have this even in the family law context where, the individual has 10 different devices and they think that their ex has hacked in every one of them. When I tell them, first off, if it's all of them, it's probably none of them, but it is probably your cloud accounts. So we see that a lot where instead of compromising the phone, they've compromised the iCloud account, set up their phone as an authorized device, and are using Find My Friends to track where you are. I've had that in half a dozen cases.
The problem with that is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is, again, a case that I just handled this week. The client one day discovers that there's a tracking device in her car. And she confronts her husband, and he sheepishly says nothing, and he just shrugs it off. And so, we use that evidence as part of our argument that there was this power and control, and that he was, spying on her when she was going. And, that's part of the reason why we wanted to get a restraining order against him. He then lays out during a deposition 2 pages worth of tracking devices that he puts on everything. He puts on a tracking device on his keys, his wallet, his car, his scooter, you know, all this other stuff. Say, this is just part of my life that I do that. I mean, it's become so common today that in a way I guess if you're going to defend against that thing, put lots of tracking devices on a lot of things. Right?
Oh my goodness, defense through obfuscation, I guess.
Right.
You know, it's my goodness. Well, I guess what I would counter with that is looking at the device history log to find out, were these all in play throughout his life, or did he actually put them all engaged a week ago
That
in
is a good one.
preparation?
Oh,
Okay.
that.
Yeah, very
Yes.
good. Yeah.
So that's something I would ask.
Okay.
And that's something I would
How
want.
could you
the
find
lo-
that information?
I would want the service that he's using and the logs behind those services
Okay.
in order to see when these devices were all registered. Because that's the investigative question.
Interesting. Okay.
And then the investigative question is, how often does he log into the portal and view the locations of all these other devices versus the one tracking his wife? Because now we can establish a pattern.
Interesting. I think we talked a little bit about cameras before in the past and stuff, but that's another thing that is perplexing. We've got all these residential burglaries that are happening around Los Angeles, and there's people that have home cameras, and we know about the Guthrie case.
Yeah.
And in that case, I think we touched on this a little bit in the past, but the FBI was able to scale back layers of something and able to actually get that image of the guy that did that and stuff. But it would seem that in this day and age that there would have been more recordings, in that particular neighborhood and stuff. Are you ever tasked with viewing video evidence for any type of litigation or for any other reason?
Oh, sure. So we had a criminal law case, actually, that I testified on. And it was alleged that our client, the defendant, deleted Ring camera evidence off of his system, a spoliation claim. And it's funny because the spoliation was the worst of the crimes that he was alleged to have done. It was worse than the assault, worse than anything
cover-up.
else. It's exactly. And it was, because that was the worst of the crimes, that's what he most vigorously defended against. And we did field testing of his home camera system, and he had a Ring camera. And one of the surprising results I had was in the field testing of 10 controlled scenarios, only 2 resulted in activation and recording out of 10.
Wow.
And I presented that to the jury. I mean, we all have our own home camera system, and we've all had experiences where it does not record when we expect it to. Suddenly there's a UPS package out on our doorstep and our cameras didn't activate, and we look back on our footage and, yep, didn't activate. It's not an uncommon occurrence, and
Right.
very few people have continuous recording cameras because you have to wire it properly, you have to get it powered all the time, and most people just, pop it on and forget it's there until it's dead,
Until
and
the
then
sensors, right?
and then the sensors pick it up. But the sensors don't always pick it up, as was in this case, and it resulted in in a not guilty plea on the spoliation charge against our client. The government was not able to prove that he had deleted the video footage from his Ring system.
Wow. So were you representing the defendant or the defendant? Oh, okay.
The defendant.
You
I was
swing
on the
both
defendant.
sides. Okay.
I do. It's but it's actually important for an expert to do that. If you have an expert that's only for one side,
You're right.
it's very problematic. And if you look back at my list of priors, I'm about 50-50 plaintiff and defense.
Wow, I didn't know that. So, speaking of that, can we talk a little bit about your background? Because
Sure.
Lori, I don't know if you know this, but Joe's father was an expert as well.
No, I
And
didn't.
so he's a second generation expert witness, and that's why I'm very impressed by his professionalism, because he really takes it to heart and stuff. But talk to me about your father.
Yeah, so my dad, his name was Dr. Joe Greenfield. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He did a lot of qualified medical examiner and AME. I don't remember the acronym for that, but he did a lot of workers' comp cases and a lot of expert testimony on medical, treatments and accidents and things like that. And so I remember growing up that he would have 4 or 5 depositions a week.
Wow.
So yeah, he's been deposed hundreds, if not thousands of times. And so I've been doing forensics for nearly 2 decades. but I actually I didn't defend my doctoral dissertation until 2019. And that's when my expert testimony work really started kicking into high gear. And so between both my partner, Brad Merriman, who was the founding supervisory agent of the FBI's computer analysis response teams here in Los Angeles, and my father having done all these depositions and trials, I had two really good mentors to help prepare me for my first time testifying. And even when I did do my first time testifying, the attorney said that it seemed like I'd been doing this a while. Coupled all that with my work at USC, because one of the things that we do at SC is in the advanced forensics class, we do a mock trial with the students. And so we get them to go to a courtroom in front of a real judge, in front of real attorneys, well-versed in cyber. Both of them have 30 years of experience, and the students have to testify as experts in front of them. And so hearing that every year for 15 years before I testified for the first time, it was important for me to understand the cadence, the professionalism, how to respond to the question being asked and no more than that, and how to understand the intricacies of the role of the expert.
Interesting.
Wow, that's so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, when I talk about experts, and maybe this is going far afield here, but I remember as a deputy DA calling criminalists all the time and calling all kinds of experts for the people.
Yeah.
Then the defense would have their experts. And a lot of the time, they were people that we always knew. We cross-examined them in many cases, and we had their number. But I got a little bit disillusioned during the O.J. Simpson case when they brought in some of these foremost criminalists in it. Like a person who was like a coroner, and could testify to things. And I remember there was one doctor, and I can't remember his name, but his response was, "There's something wrong. Something's missing." He didn't say what it was, but the way he said it, and I was wondering, how he was kind of acting a little bit. Now, I don't think he was fabricating everything, but the way that he was inferring, that there was something wrong with the evidence, I thought maybe it was crossing the line a little bit. I don't care how much he was being paid, but
and I've seen the same thing from my side, seeing the other side's experts, kind of crossing a line, I think, between advocacy and non. It's my role is to make sure that the truth is told, and as the attorney, your job is to advocate for the client, and you and I understand that role very well. And sometimes it doesn't work for certain attorneys that have reached out to us, and there have been a lot of times where they, I've been reached out to, and I say, well, this is what I can do. Well, I need you to say this, and I'll say, it sounds like you're looking for another expert than me. And but it's important. My reputation is what's at stake.
Yeah,
it's everything.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about these cases that I've
Sure.
opened the show up with that. So, Lori, this is gonna be fun, I think. Okay, so Hunter Biden. Okay, so you had your hands on his laptop.
Not quite as a laptop. So
Okay.
I'll tell you the story, which I've told before, not recorded. This is the first time I'm actually talking about it on anything recorded. So we were approached by a news agency, and this was in I don't remember the exact date anymore, but you can find the article online. It's with the Daily Mail.
It was pre-COVID, I think.
It was right in the heart of COVID.
Right in the heart of it?
Right in the heart of COVID. And the question was posed to me is, we have a laptop that was allegedly abandoned by its owner that may have newsworthy material on it. And I live in Los Angeles, and I thought, which Kardashian left their laptop at a Starbucks?
That's right.
That's where there's no way it would have went to where it did. And they laughed and they said, no, it's not a Kardashian. I said, okay. They said, will you take the case? And I said, I need an attorney to make sure that I have the legal authority to do this work. I am not going to do this work without an attorney. And they said, we understand, we respect that. So there was an attorney hired. And I worked with the attorney, and they said, we're not going to tell you anything about whose it is until you have agreement signed. And I said, well, I'm going to reserve the right to back out if we have a conflict, because you're wanting me to engage before I even know if I have a conflict. This is problematic, but okay. And that's when they told me Now the engagement's signed. The data belongs to Hunter Biden. I went, really? Wait.
Did you even know who he was at the time?
I did know who he
Okay.
was because, it was at the time it was one of the biggest digital forensic questions was there's all this data floating around the internet that was allegedly from his laptop, but he's denying that it was his. And I heard the story about the laptop repair shop owner and all that. So I'll talk about what I can talk about with the case because it is under attorney-client privilege. But I can talk about this part of the story because it was in the news article. But my scope was well defined, and that's one thing that I do want to, share with your listeners is the best outcomes from the work we do is from a very well defined scope. And for the work we did, the scope was well defined, and for this case, the scope was well defined. The scope was: is there any evidence on this data that it was manufactured by a foreign intelligence agency? Period. I wasn't asked to look at messages, photos, videos, emails, none of that.
None of it had anything to do with his divorce.
None of it had anything to do with his divorce or anything.
Right.
Artistry.
It was, or his artistry, none of that. And if people ask, well, what did the photos show? I don't know. That wasn't part of my scope. So my scope was analyzing the metadata and the way the data was laid out to see if there was patterns indicative of manufactured data.
It's really fascinating how you were able to form that opinion from looking at it. Could you? I know that you could get way over our heads, but can you explain a little bit about how you did that?
Sure. Well, luckily my background in academia helped me because I manufactured data for the case scenarios I built for my students. So I'm familiar with how data should be laid out on a drive when it follows the chronological flow of data and patterns relating to natural user actions versus somebody trying to manufacture it in a short period of time, then backdating all that data. And the metadata did not show that it was manufactured.
Uh-oh.
Exactly. Quite the opposite. The layout of all the data was chronological, did match the overall flow of normal usage and behavior of computers. The devices that were connected and synchronized matched makes and models that were appropriate for those time periods. We had external account synchronization logs that appeared to be unaltered and untampered with. So all of that led to my expert opinion that there is no indication that this was manufactured because even foreign intelligence agencies, there's humans involved and humans make mistakes. There's always going to be something wrong, just like you were talking about that expert. Something's wrong, but I would actually try to figure out what that is. And say, these series of files don't match this pattern, and neither do these. And these instead indicate that somebody was trying to create this in a very short time period because the metadata doesn't match what the content is.
Wow. So the next case that we really want to talk about is Tom Brady. I mean, that's fascinating that you get involved in that.
So I can talk very briefly about it because it was actually another examiner in my firm that did that case.
Okay.
So the question was, did he know about the deflated footballs? And there was no evidence on his devices that he knew. And that's what was in our report.
That
and
was the finding.
That was the finding. It was.
Hate to let down all those NFL
I know, I'm sorry.
Fans that want to pin them against the wall.
I'm sorry.
But anyways, so you had to have looked at his cell phone then, I guess. Or not you, but whoever examined it.
Yeah, based on my recollection. Well, based on my recollection, we looked at what devices were available.
Okay.
And based on the devices that we had available to us, based on
including the guy with the pump for the pump.
I don't know about that one. So whatever devices were available, and again, you can look up my partner Brad Merriman, and you can find the article in there. But based on my recollection of that, and again, I've worked on thousands of cases since then, there was no indication that there was any evidence that
conspiracy
there was no conspiracy.
Conspiracy to deflate them or inflate them or whatever.
There was no indication.
Okay, one last one, and this is the Ariana. I'm going to ask you, Lori, to walk us through that one because I actually don't know about that celebrity or the
Ariana Maddox and how you helped them with that. menage a trois, threesome?
Sure. Luckily for me, and this may not be terribly exciting for your viewers, but one of the things that actually this will highlight is our role in cases and how we really are just fact finders. The declaration that I wrote, and again, I don't remember it, to be honest, because it was quite a while ago. I'd have to refresh my recollection
Sure.
in the legal terms to say that. But we had a series of queries from the attorney to say, did these communications exist or did they not exist? And that's my recollection of the case. And then it was just us providing this chronology of events. And we don't spin tales. We don't, make up messages. It's simply, this is what the evidence is. It is what it is. And so in our role, it's important that we really just focus on the fact-finding mission.
You don't interview the people at all, right? You're just looking at the devices, I guess.
In fact, what I normally recommend is that we don't interview
Right.
the people.
Yeah.
Because I want to rely upon my testimony being as objective as possible. And if I'm talking to people, people's memories may not be the best. They may not recall certain things the way they are. And I don't want to get my narrative confused between what they either did or didn't say, or even what they may or may not have said in a deposition.
No, I have to say that you didn't speak to our client at all. I don't
Yeah.
think it ever. So it's good. Do you think that in your work, there's like the majority of the things you're looking at are cell phones, or is it equally with that in like laptops and computers, or what are you examining mostly?
Well, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said computers.
Right.
Today, it's everything and anything that is digital. So it might be logs from a social media account. It may be, call data records involving, various parties. I worked on one case that the call data records, this was a family law case, showed that during the times that one individual was supposed to be supervising the children, they were off in other continents and set up their phone
Holy cow.
to forward messages and phone calls to a tertiary device of theirs, but they left that phone behind so that when it got pinged via Find Friends, it showed up in the right city.
Wow.
And it was only when the children were asked questions by our client did they mention, oh, so-and-so wasn't here, we were being watched by one of their family members.
Again, you reminded me of what just happened this past week. The same gentleman who put this image up on the cloud using AI, he was able to alter his location. So it scared the heck out of our client because she was looking, she thought he was following her, and she felt assured that he was not because his location was still at the home. And then a second later, there he is. He's at her parents' home and stuff. And he under oath, while I was deposing him, he admitted that he had altered the location and stuff. How do you do that?
Oh, ask any of our teenage children; they can tell you exactly how to do it.
Okay.
Oh yeah. What you do is they, many of our teenage. Oh, I don't have any teenagers, but a lot of teenagers that I know have both an iPhone and an iPad, and so you can specify which device responds to location inquiries for the individual. And so they'll set it to the iPad, which is at the home, versus the iPhone.
So would you be able to figure that out if somebody called you and said, hey, could you prove that he's manipulated his location?
Oh, yeah. The location information, that's something that is a setting on both the iPad and the iPhone that we'd be able to
If you
pull out.
had those two devices, you would be able to testify that, hey, this looks like, okay.
Yep,
All right.
absolutely.
What about when people spoof their numbers?
Oh, we're getting into a whole nother world.
What does
No,
that mean? I
that's-
don't even know what that means, Lori.
So this is definitely getting into a increasing area that we're seeing in family law, which is spoof numbers, anonymous texting, anonymous messaging apps. I had a very big involved trial involving one individual harassing our client via spoofed messages and anonymous messaging apps. And I've had a number of attorneys inquire about, can we do something about that? Can we do the attribution? And I can say, yes, we can. The caveat is it gets very expensive very quickly. because this is kind of what you have to do. First, you have to have enough volume of messages in order to testify that it is true harassment. That's the lawyers, that's not me. Then we take the phone numbers that are being utilized in this harassment campaign. We then do a query as far as who is the servicer of the number. And what you're looking for is the IP addresses, because that person's going to put in fake names, fake numbers, fake addresses. Once you have the IP addresses, you then go to the internet service providers and subpoena those records. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if the person's using a VPN? VPN is a virtual private network. It allows you to tunnel your internet connection through another location, service, etc. And I'll say, yes, somebody can use a VPN, but humans make mistakes. So there's going to be some connection in there where they forget to turn on their VPN. And that's where you get them. Because then when you subpoena the service provider, you get the home address, hopefully, or an address known to everyone involved, and then you have attribution. So multiple subpoenas, multiple levels, and of course, Don, you know that means multiple cost factors
it could
involved
be,
in
and
this.
time as well.
And time.
You're not going to get the results immediately. I mean, and that's one of the challenges in family law is how can you do a thorough investigation when there's limited resources sometimes, or limited patience on the part of the judge who's not going to give you the time. So it really is, important that people get a head start on it at the beginning. Some of the things you just said reminds me of cases that we've had where we've had to subpoena, where devices were purchased, and by who, and you get the records of purchasing and things like that.
Absolutely.
That's cool. Well, I think that we've spent a lot of time here today, and probably more than we expected. But you're just so good, dude.
Oh.
I mean,
That's so
I think we could talk to you for 2 hours here.
Yes.
Really, really good. So, I just want to thank you and hope that you could come back another time. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
really, really good. I know that I'm going to see you again in court, and I think that all of our viewers out there should rest assured that there are really good experts out there. You just have to be able to find them. And today, I think we've demonstrated we've got the top, type of expert, in case you have any type of a digital type of investigation that needs to be done. Thank you again, and we'll see you again on Talkin Divorce.